All right, back to supply and demand. Let me adjust this just a little bit so you got the whole whiteboard. So what we talked about last time is why we might have an equilibrium price of $1 selling a quantity of 1 million bottles of water on Long Island in July. These are made up numbers, but the logic is what we care about here. So the question is going to be, what happens when we break ceteris paribus? Well, let's say the thing that changes is there is some explosion at a water bottling plant in New Jersey. So Pepsi's plant where they bottle, I forget Pepsi's brand, Aquafina, it explodes, and now we just have less ability to supply the amount of water people want. In a situation like that, there's basically two ways we might approach this problem. One is to ask, does this affect supply or demand? And in which direction? And that's the easy one for this example, right? So obviously it affects supply. It doesn't make your water any more or less delicious to know that a factory in New Jersey exploded. Your values, your marginal benefits stay exactly the same. But the ability of suppliers to get you bottled water has clearly been diminished, right? That means that at a price of $1, we can't expect to get 1 million anymore. Maybe we only get 800,000. So supply shifts to the left in that case. Now, let me point out something else along those lines. We have to remember quantity increase is moving to the right. This is a story where we say supply has decreased or supply has fallen. We fall this way. We don't fall this way. And one way to think about that, we'll call this supply prime to show that it's a changed state from our original. We could think about this either as at the old price, what happens to the quantity that sellers are willing and able to sell? And that has obviously gone down to a lower quantity at the old price. Another way to think about it is if we were to get this old quantity, what price would we need? And that price would obviously be a higher price, because to get 1 million bottles out of a diminished supply chain, we're going to have to ask the other bottling plants to run overtime. We are going to face higher costs, and that's where it's useful to think about supply as representing the marginal cost. In this case, clearly marginal cost of getting to 1 million bottles is higher than it was when we had more bottling plants operating. Or at the old price, we're going to get less quantity supply. So that's a nice simple supply curve shift. Another way we might think about a situation like this is to think about, what do we expect to happen to price and to quantity? In this case, we expect the price of bottled water, it should be higher if there are fewer factories because of some accident. And there should probably also be less water during the summer, given that there is less productive capacity. So we would make a prediction in that case. We can kind of draw quadrants over our initial supply and demand. Let me erase this really quickly. We're going to get back to it anyways. And we say we expect the price to go up, so we're going to be either here or here. And we expect the quantity to go down, so we expect to end up here. So we expect our equilibrium to move somewhere in this direction. Now, is that going to be a supply change or a demand change? Maybe people say, I had no idea that bottling plants were so dangerous. I don't want to feel bad about putting workers at risk, asking them to engage in a job where they might get exploded. So maybe people want to buy less bottled water as a result, right? We would have a lower demand. That might be part of the story, right? A lot of things often change. Now, in practice, we would say that's probably going to be a small change, small enough that we can assume it away. But let's leave it up there. We're predicting that we move up and to the left. If we have such a change in demand, that's moving our equilibrium down. So for us to end up back here, we're going to have to also have some sort of a supply shift to allow this red arrow to be pointing in the right direction. So maybe we have a change in demand, maybe demand increases. People say, I'm going to buy more bottled water in solidarity for the brave essential workers in the bottling plants. People go out to buy more, in which case maybe we're pushing up and to the right. And again, we need that supply shift to push us back to the left. So the net effect is, if our intuitions are correct, that price rises and quantity falls, it must be that whatever happens with demand, there has to be a bigger shift up and to the left of supply. And again, that means either less at the old price or a higher cost to get to the same quantity. All right, let's stop there and then be more explicit about the shifting curves.